Hello, the coaches are back. This is Darrell Spears, EliteConversations.com, and we have Darlene Brown back with Divine Empowerment, and we have Dr. Tiffany Perdue back as well with Compass Group. So we're excited to come back, and we're excited to have a guest in the house.
Hello.
We have Ms. Tiffany Donaldson in the house, and she's with Donaldson Legal Counseling PLLC. And again, this is Coach's Corner. We are excited to bring this format to you, bring this format to business owners so that you can have information and knowledge that can really help you prosper in your business. And we try to keep it simple. We don't want to get complicated, but we really just want to give you some things that you can really apply to your business that are practical. And also, we even talk about maybe some of those roadblocks that you might have, and maybe we can help you get over some of those roadblocks as well. So again, I am Darrell Spears, and today we are talking about the legal aspects of business, which is so important, and how we properly legalize our business now will save us maybe some heartache, maybe some money, maybe our business in the long run. So join in as we talk. We're going to start a little bit with just what is the first thing we should think about as a new business owner? Again, most of our clientele, we're truly trying to help the startup, the new business owners. We're glad to have Tiffany here. As a new business owner, we're ready. Let's say we have our business plan.
Okay, yeah.
And we're ready to launch.
Mm-hmm.
Legally, what is everything we need to have in place to make sure that we can go off and sell?
Okay, so let me just take a poll here. So what would you guess? What would be the first thing you guess I'm going to talk about? You already have your business plan, so you're rearing to go.
Was picking the legal structure.
Oh, it's close. It's close. It's a tie. Okay, what would you guess?
Are you going to be LLC, incorporated?
Yeah.
How are you going to protect yourself?
That's right.
From a liability perspective.
Okay, so I would agree with that. Okay. And then a tie for that is also what your business is going to be named.
Okay.
And that is because whether it's Inc. or LLC on the end is kind of a afterthought. Well, it's going to go along with the structure that you choose. But you want to focus on, before you even go file that name, what is it going to be?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people never think about this, but as Darrell and I were talking on a different episode, there's trademark law that underpins all of namings of businesses and products. And this is not spoken about hardly ever, definitely not enough. And so I think definitely for the small business person, this might be the first time they heard about this concept. And so if you want to get a trademark for your business, this is a federal filing that protects your rights in the mark in the name of your company. The caveat to that is other people have already filed some names. You're not the first one, right? And just because you're in love with this new name that you've thought of,
you gotta have it.
It doesn't mean you can.
That's true.
It doesn't mean you can have it.
Yeah.
And not only that, if you don't get a trademark search, just a bare minimum level one, to make sure someone isn't using it in your field and you just start using it, you can get a cease and desist letter that'll tell you stop using it. That's the nice way. You also could get sued. You can get sued for 3 times your profits if you're knowingly using a name that someone else has and not caring about it.
Wow.
So you don't want to go into business to lose money, right?
Right.
Let alone put money behind a name that you have to go change.
Right.
So that's one huge concept is the trademarking your name. And then the other huge concept that you guys touched on, of course, is what structure is your business going to be. And this is generally, when anybody comes to me first time, is the conversations that we have. In the business structure question, everybody always wants to know, well, which one is better? So just to inform people generally, like for a small business person, what do you think are the options for business structure?
Well, I'm going to say incorporated.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have the regular C corporation, which is the default corporation you're going to have if you file corporation. What's another option?
S corporation.
An S corporation. And what is an S corporation is the question a lot of people ask me. And all that means is it's an election under subchapter S of the IRS code that elects how you can be taxed, how your corporation can be taxed. And it's slightly complicated. An accountant can also explain this to you in detail, but it's a tax election so that when your corporation at the end of the year has made a profit, guess what? You have to pay tax on that profit. And in an S corporation, the taxes are passed through. That's why it's called pass-through entity to you personally, and you report those taxes on your personal income tax. If you didn't elect S, you have a C corporation that needs to file its own income tax at the end of the year. So it can be a huge tax difference. There can be pluses and minuses to both. That's a whole entire show. So I won't stick on that topic alone. But then there's the third option that everybody hears about a lot, which is the limited liability company. And there's some huge differences between corporations and limited liability companies. There are some restrictions on S corporations, but when it comes to a small company, generally they're going to choose between a corporation that elects S and an LLC. So some of the major differences between those are a corporation has shares. So when you own a share of a corporation, it's really not you yourself generally who's the important one. It's the fact that you put that money in for that share and you represent kind of, a section, and you'll get your money at the end of the year when a distribution is taken. Generally in an LLC, everyone's called members, and generally the members themselves are important. That means that individual. Now this isn't the case across the board, and you can be either structure, so it shouldn't limit, but the general concepts are if you're a member owner in an LLC and you yourself want to leave, the default rules in some states are that's it, the LLC will end. That's how important you are to the LLC if you don't have an operating agreement that says otherwise. So it's kind of a general concepts background between the two of them. You can actually structure either to do what the other one does, so you're not really stuck either way. But those are some of the introductory concepts for S versus LLC.
It's funny because one of the things when I work with clients is always starting with two things: the name, and then they go on like GoDaddy or Google, and they want to get that name matched with the URL that they buy, right? And it's like, I got my URL, I got my website with my web address, and they're excited. In Maryland, I think there's a website where you can get a trade name, right? And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on trade naming under Maryland versus the kind of the federal.
Oh, that's a great question. I do get that all the time. And there's also the concept of DBA, which means doing business as, which goes along with the trade name. And this is where the concepts come together. So we were talking about forming an entity. Well, you don't have to form an entity to go into business. And if you don't do it, you're called a sole proprietor. Now, we know as business owners, the reason you don't want to be a sole proprietor is because your personal assets are at stake, but the listeners may not know that. So if you want to separate your house, your car, your boat, if you don't want, some disgruntled client to go after that in court, then that's why you want to form an entity and treat your entity as a business to protect your personal assets. But some people are so small, they're not ready for that step yet, or it's a certain type of business, doesn't have the same risk. They've been a sole proprietor for 30 years. They refuse to file. Okay. They can still change the name that they're operating under. So you can elect to operate under a different name, whether you're LLC, whether you're an S corporation, or sole proprietor. And that is what you can file with the state as a trade name. Okay. And you could have 50 of them as long as they're registered. And some people might do this if they have multiple divisions. They don't want to have 3 LLCs, but they want to appear like 3 different companies for tax purposes or whatever. And so when you file that name with the state, it's a lot like when you file your S corporation for the first time or your LLC for the first time. You're holding yourselves out to the state as that name associated with you. Totally different from trademark protection. Absolutely no trademark protection related to that filing. And remember, a trademark filing is a federal filing, right? So this is going to protect your mark across the whole nation. Filing a trade name, it's just like naming your business the first time. It doesn't protect you whatsoever from that person who already using it, right? So, but it's a great question. I get it all the time. And a lot of people are very confused by the difference. So it's a great question.
Wow. And now I wonder, have any of you guys dealt with any of your clients that have had to change their name once they've gotten into business, and they might have been in the business for a year, 2 years, and all of a sudden they've come to a place where you actually have to change it. Do you see that as a big impact in terms of you doing business? You already have your clientele and all that good stuff. So how impactful is that name change when you have to make that change? Is that something that has happened before that you've seen?
Yeah, I actually had a client, his company might have been Armor and Glory. It was sports apparel. And Under Armour came after them.
Wow.
And the outcome was that they had to change the name. And the logo was too similar.
Oh, okay.
So it wasn't just a name.
How far along had he gotten in business?
He had spent thousands of dollars in apparel product creation.
Okay.
So it cost him, he tried to fight it, but he lost.
So when you get a name, how much, like I said, it wasn't Under Armour, it was Armor and Apparel.
Well,
This example is really interesting because I have like 10 questions associated with that because I know a little bit about trademark law. And there's a lot of different concepts that float around, but we were talking about this before, and the major one is don't be too close to anybody gigantic. Because the more money you have, the more attorneys you have, the more persuasive you are. And there's actually trademark, really famous. There are certain marks that are called famous marks. And it's really the more prevalent the mark is. And Under Armour, at this point, is a big mark. Now, so my first question would be, what year, when, who was first? Because if Under Armour was unknown, and they were 2 months later filed Armor and Glory. Armor and Glory would have had a great chance to have beaten Under Armour after they put thousands of dollars that they didn't want to put towards it. Would that have been worth it? Probably not.
Right, but so what it is, there are variations, as you said. So we know Under Armour as Under Armour, obviously, but in their filings, they have other variations that they already own, that they have not necessarily utilized. But that's where it comes back to naming, because for them, they're building a brand, so they secured naming conventions, right? And so that was the loophole of why they were able to successfully win that. But when you're a startup company, you're not necessarily thinking at that level.
Right.
And so even when you go to trademark the name of your business, right, because that in itself is a cost, you don't think about variations of that. Right? You just think about your name. But at some point as your company grow, it might be worth it to think about different variations because the people come along and they, if you don't do that, then they can actually get a variation of that name and legally use it. And
so you actually cannot file a trademark for something you're not actively using. So to the extent they filed variations on Under Armour means somewhere they're actually using those variations too, which isn't that hard to do.
Right.
The more money you have, the more it's easy to do whatever you want.
Yes, absolutely.
But I did have a client that had received a cease and desist letter. She was in the education industry, and she had to change her name. And it was actually somebody from the Atlanta area, but they had the trademark, and she did not. And she actually met her after this had all happened, but she told me, she didn't really feel like she had really much to say about it. She didn't have the mark, and they had it, and they were in a similar industry. So trademark goes by industry. And so if someone's using that name that you absolutely love and they're using it in a way that has nothing to do with the industry you're in, you may still get it. If the bigger they are, the more they can keep you out of an industry they're not in. They have to be huge to do that. So that's why I would say work with a trademark attorney, get a search and an evaluation, because that step right there can save you thousands in going the wrong way. In your logo design, in securing that website, especially if you're going to pay to get a website name. It should all be together in a package, honestly. But it's definitely somewhere that I encourage people to start, because I've seen multiple people have to change or not be able to get the trademark on what they wanted, and then they change. So
and you mentioned the website. It's a good segue, because a lot of new startups, new businesses, as soon as they are ready to launch, the first thing they want to do is, I got to get me a website, get it developed. Talk a little bit about terms and agreements and how important it is in having that in place when you start to launch your business and your product and services.
Sure. So as people get into online-based businesses, website-based businesses, the people who come onto your website are either your clients or looking to be. Mm-hmm. And generally, we all know that the bigger the website we are on, we've either clicked agree to something we didn't read, or it's at least down there in the corner.
Yeah.
And so there's developing law across the country, California being the leader who actually already requires it, that anybody that has a public website has to have a privacy policy in place. And what goes along with that is the terms and conditions. So generally, like you've probably seen on other websites, the terms and conditions are the person who owns the website explaining to the person that's on the website or the purchaser, especially if it's a purchasing type website, mm-hmm. what the terms and conditions are of their use of that site and generally of the purchase. So for instance, when I work with clients who have any type of shopping cart in their website, that's the type of person who's going to want to have privacy policy and terms and conditions. Mm. And the terms and conditions will generally also include the terms and conditions of your third party who's doing the credit card processing. Mm-hmm. Who do you accept? PayPal? Do you accept, Visa, MasterCard? There's all kinds of other third-party processors. And what happens if the third-party processor gets hacked? They have your client's credit card information through the transaction with you. They find out about it, and I don't know, they lose money related to it. Are they going to go after the third-party processor? No. They can trace it back to you. You're where they want. They're coming after you. And so the terms and conditions aren't for the person shopping. They're for the person who owns the website. And it's protection and it's disclosures, and it's like, hey, you're on my website. I'm using PayPal. You want to use PayPal, go for it. You don't, get off the website. And that's what it's for. It's to set up, and what I do is I help them think through all different kinds of negative scenarios, and then we do all the disclosures that we can, and so that when people click that agree, that's them assenting to the use of all these terms. And they can't later say they didn't read it. That's a whole nother problem. But at least you capture that they, their IP address is associated with them having been told those conditions. And so it's all about the protection of the website owner. Now, it can depend on the website. So, for instance, some people may just have, like, news or blogs and things like that. Well, there's a lot of liability related to perpetuating something that's false about someone. You're looking at liability related to copyright infringement. It may be completely accurate information. It's just the person who put it on your site wasn't the one, And now they're going to come after you because you're the host. And there's actually laws that allow people to come after the person who owns the platform. They go back to publishing, but now they're being translated over to whoever's hosting the site. And so that's why I tell people, if you're getting into a blog or inviting other people on, don't forget that you're the one that's ultimately responsible for that information. So there's a lot of liability that comes with that type of website. And one way to try to get out of that liability is your disclaimers of your terms and conditions that the users on there can agree to. Now, there are some things where, you can try all you want, but public policy is still going to hold your feet to the fire. And those are good things to just be aware of, to know the actual risks of what you're getting into. But those are the types of things where, if you keep thinking down the slippery slope, if people I've had people change their mind. Talk them out of it.
Right.
Only because they realize being able to keep up with a site and review everything wasn't economical for what they were looking to get into, and it's like, who are you going to pay to do that?
And that was going to be my next question. The terms and agreement, you almost have to be assessing that every month, basically. I mean, as you bring on new products, as you change, it's just a lot to.
It is true. It's kind of it's a living, breathing document, and the thing is, it's there to protect you. So if you don't update it, you know.
Right.
You're the one who's not going to be covered when that new thing happens, right? So it's really there, but it's there for you, and I think that that's important for business owners to know.
Mm-hmm. So, and I have to ask this question because it's I'm going to say a thin line. So where does the line stop from website and social media? Because on the social media side of it, I mean, people are sharing each other's information and content all the time, and there's no repercussion for that. But if you do the same thing in your website, I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, I think it's very different because I think social media is covered by the social media. So absolutely, when you create an account on any type of social media, when you create that account, you are basically saying by agreeing to it that anything that you post, you lose ownership to. In essence, even though you posted it, you open it up for other people to be able to share it. And that's why they have all these different filters, if you will. Right? So when you set up certain things on your site, you can go in the settings and you can say who you want to see what. You can say if you want people to be able to share. They've created those kind of filters for that reason. But I always say to everyone, the moment you post something on social media, you've now lost ownership to that.
Right. So if I take it from, like say, instead of taking it from an article, if it comes from social media to my website, isn't that public now or not?
I mean, it's a good question. I see what you're saying. Yeah, the lines blur, right? For
everybody to use
what I mean, as a good attorney, what I'm going to tell you is probably what you don't want to do, which is you want to go back to the source and ask them if you can use their information, because this is the line. I think you're using it for a commercial purpose. You're using their information, maybe perhaps to promote, or you're hopefully not selling whatever they came up with without their permission. So even though it may have been reposted a million times, to the extent that's kind of free publicity for them. Right. But if in any way it's going to become a commercial purpose for you, I would say get their approval. Yeah, I like that. Because let's say they come after you and say, you made a book without my permission, which there are things that you can do without people's permissions, and there are lines. But to the extent they can get their claws into anything, they're going to come after you when you make money. They're looking for the dollars. Whenever there's a pot of money is when people start to show up. And so I would say, for just use that as your line. And if you aren't sure, then get the permission. That's and especially we were talking about people utilizing pictures off the internet. It's the same concept, If someone shared it with you, then someone shared it with them before, and if it's your personal Facebook, it's a bit different. But for commercial purposes, don't use any type of photo without permission.
Can I ask a question about legal entity again? I deal with a lot of nonprofits and folks that set up 501c3s and that are looking for grant funds for different types of things. So I'm wondering any advice on that entity that you've seen or dealt with in getting that started.
Well, the number one thing for 501c3s, the actual startup process got a lot easier in the last year and a half. It's actually easier to start a brand new one, to transfer a working company to go 501c3. That's some advice. So I would say just start from the top. And then really, there's not really anything holding you back. You just have to do the normal business, have a bank account, have enough funds to get it going. You want to make sure that you've qualified for your 501c3 before you start taking in or soliciting donations. You want to make sure that you're not jumping the gun on that. Okay. Other than that, I wouldn't advise anybody to do a 501c3 without an attorney, because there are so many lines on what you can and can't do. But one major thing to keep in mind is that people who start 501c3s, if you want to work for it, it's actually, there's a lot of arm's length that goes on with them. So if you actually want to be employed by the 501c3, you may not want to be the person to start it. And also, for being on the board, generally people who are on the board are not going to be employed by the 501c3.
Right, exactly.
And a lot of people, they may lose the baby. It's happened before. So to the extent you're thinking this is going to be your full-time job, it's not that you can't do it. You have to do it the right way. and you may have to work with a group that wants to start it and employ you versus you being the one that starts it.
Okay.
And that's yet another reason to get some counseling before you jump in feet first, because you may be able to accomplish your goals a different way. But yeah, that's a whole whole nother show.
Wow.
So that's a couple shows.
Much better than LegalZoom, man.
This is some great information. So what would you say are, and when you're starting a business entity, what are the 2 or 3 things that you've seen that new business owners do that they should avoid? Any of y'all can jump in. Are there those pitfalls that you just shouldn't, or things that you shouldn't avoid as a new business owner?
Well, I would just say off the top, getting your QuickBooks set up or some type of accounting.
Yes.
I think I can probably speak from experience that
Even if you start
need
out
help
with
with
Excel,
that.
but you got to have that
Yeah.
documented.
Yes.
Day one, so many people don't have any idea. They don't even have a line budget to just say, okay, what is it going to take for me to get my domain, to pay my website, to do. They don't even create that in a regular Excel spreadsheet, and it's critically important because you spend a lot of money on the initial stages in starting up your business, and you have nowhere that is documented.
Yeah, and that's a good point to keep track of what you personally are putting in, because that becomes business expense and it's actually called pre-incorporation expenses that legally you can deduct those. So not keeping track of that, you're just hurting yourself.
Yeah.
What about
That's
you?
great. That's excellent.
Well, I think not knowing your weaknesses and not knowing your strengths, and sometimes because we think we can, especially as business owners and entrepreneurs, we think we're pretty good at everything. If we don't out-task or outsource or give certain things away, particularly, I know myself, I'm more of a strategist and a visionary, so I'm not good at the details. So I need the lawyers and the accountants and the QuickBooks and all that good stuff. So not knowing your strengths or not knowing your weaknesses is also something you want to avoid.
Yeah, excellent. Well, this has gone so quickly.
Yeah.
For a 30-minute show, we haven't even tapped in. I think we got through 2 of 8 questions.
Right.
But it's so important, and we're glad that we were able to come and share what I think was some critical nuggets in terms of what we need to do to make sure that we have our entity and have the legal things in place. So I want to thank you, Tiffany, for the wealth of information that you provided. You guys are here with the coaches. We have our coaches, myself, Darrell Spears, Darlene Brown, and Dr. Anthony. You can find information about them on EliteConversations.com, as well as how to reach out to them, because we want to extend this, not just make it a show, but if you need to reach Darlene, if you need to reach Dr. Perdue, go to EliteConversations.com, get their information, reach out to them for help, whatever, and you can find not only these individuals, but our other coaches, Affie Harrington and Todd Rogers there as well. But before we leave, we want you, Tiffany, to definitely share your information, how people can reach you, because I already know folks are probably going to be dialing up your phone number as soon as they see this video, because you provided some nuggets, and I think people have a clear vision of what they need to do. So how can individuals reach you?
Well, sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. My phone number is 301-332-2354, so you can just call me up or give me an email at counsel, that's COUNSEL, at DLCESQ.com for Donaldson Legal Counseling. And my website is www.dlcesq.com.
Excellent. And I think you're barred where? How many places are you barred?
I'm admitted to practice in Maryland and D.C.,
Okay.
New York, and I'm also admitted in Florida, but I'm inactive in Florida. And I can recommend you to anybody if you're a Virginia area person. I can give you a good recommendation as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Thank you guys for joining Coach's Corner. We're here every week to provide you knowledge and to really give you the information to take your business to the next level. I am Darrell Spears, and this is
Darlene Brown.
This is
Dr. Perdue.
and we're so glad to have Tiffany Donaldson with us. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.